Christopher tying some of the themes I was just touching on, philanthropy and family office, multi-gen dynamics, and then we'll shed some light on some. I don't know if Vera's not here. Vera is both. Jasmine is new to our community. She just raised her hand and says, "I'll bring food to the birthday gathering." Got that out. You took that off my list. Thank you. Janine was talking about female founders. To reiterate here, approval, so seeing what she does also resonates. You do. And Dekai is sort of almost an OG 361er. It feels like it. So we put this together in Riyadh, and now the book's out. So we're gonna hear all about it. So maybe I'll start off with the themes that we talked about.
So one of the things I was talking about earlier was the idea of impact investing versus philanthropy, and the family next gen idea of time frame that we tied with them. I tend to feel that there's a lot of next gens that need an impact fund. That fund manager says, I can get you just as high of returns, it's just going to have amazing impact, and you should invest in this. And then that next gen takes that to their mother or father, and their mother or father, no longer trust them. So the concept of actually how do you actually frame it in a way that actually brings families together, and how you actually try to make that next gen look more mature, familiarized instead of idiot. So one of the concepts is a matter of framing. Actually, we talked about this a little bit yesterday at the BART station. I tend to think that family next gen should frame things from a philanthropic standpoint. Because every family office, not every, but most family offices do have a philanthropic cause, but they don't necessarily have impact investing. So even though I do impact investing, I talk to my family always on the lines of philanthropy. Because when you say philanthropy, you say, what do we care about as a family? What's the legacy that we want to leave? What's the impact that we want to leave? And the family goes, yeah, we care about this, we care about this. Let's donate this much this year. And then when they mentally are thinking about it as a donation, then there's no longer a return perspective. And now that next gen can take that money and start to look at where they allocate. Right? When they allocate that, it's a long time duration, but the following year, when they go back to the family goes, should we donate to that same cause? And now that next gen can say, we don't need to donate to that same cause. We invest in that company is still running, still having that same impact this second year. And now we can donate an impact, and we can invest in something different, right? It changes that whole dynamic of parents. So one of the things I always love asking next gens is, when did your parents first see you as an adult? And I think that's something that helps in that space. That's all I was going to say, and then Mark left. I don't know what it was.
All right, so I am what I call a values investor. And what that means is that I'm very conscious of how all the numbers work. Because whether you realize it or not, every dollar you have, even the dollar you're not paying, is making an impact. And I care deeply about the impact that my money is making. What I realized, so just to give you some context of how I got here, I started my career in 1981 as an assembly language coder. For some of you actually know what that is. In the 80s, I worked at Apple Computer. I had an amazing 15-year career in the tech world. I was an executive at a startup. I left that. I did a 5-month solo backpacking trip through sub-Saharan Africa in 1995. When I left for Africa, I was in the CEO of the multimedia industry, and when I came back, this thing called the internet online, and everyone I knew was riding that train. I had seen unconscionable poverty in Africa. And I decided I was going to somehow figure out to use my life and my work to create change there. And so I created a second career of over 20 years, looking at the role that tech and business thinking play in poverty alleviation. I got involved in something called microfinance, which at the time that I got involved in it was making small loans to women to help them out of poverty. It had been around for 40 years. There were 100 million people who had been positively served and brought out of poverty. McKinsey and Company said that 2.5 billion people needed that kind of help. It was completely completely funded by philanthropy. There was no way in the world we were gonna get from 100 million served to 2.5 million served. So we started experimenting, we started commercializing microfinance, and we started applying tech. A new industry was formed called mobile money. It started in 2007 in Kenya. The cell phone became the bank for the poor. When I became one of the first mobile money experts in the world, and in 2017, when I left that career, we had already 500 million people who were being poor people served with financial services. So we went from 100 million to 500 million in 10 years because commercial capital came in. If you think that philanthropy or the government is going to get us where we need to be, you're wrong. We're not going to create the change in the world that we need by doing things the same way we've done before. If you look at all the philanthropic dollars in the world, it is between 0.5 to 1.5% capital markets. That's it. 1.5% at its best. So what I realized is, through my experience and through the worlds that I was swimming in, that if we want to start putting our capital, our corpus, to work for the world that we want to see, then we're going to keep living in the world that we're in. And so when I retired ostensibly, 7 years ago, I took my money back from my financial advisors because they weren't getting me where I wanted to be. And I started to realize that we are now at a point where anyone, even someone with just a bank account, can put their money to work with their values. I wrote a book during COVID called Activate Your Money, Invest to Grow Your Wealth, and Build a Better World, because this is not about getting a financial return for me. This is about getting growth. And I started a nonprofit called Invest for Better, and we're putting women in small groups and teaching them how to do this. And so this is really what I'm about and what I believe. I think our capital, our corpus matters tremendously. Philanthropy is great, but it's not enough.
Hi, I'm Jasmine again. Thank you so much for welcoming me here. I'm not part of the investor world at all. Again, I'm an OBGYN and minimally invasive pelvic surgeon and robotic surgery. That's my day job with a fertility company. But I'm here to talk about Mercy Foundation, which was started in Nairobi. So my mentor, who's been doing this kind of work for about 15 years, she is someone who has undergone gender affirmation surgery and then learned how to perform gender affirmation surgery as an OBGYN with the pioneers. And because she reconstructs the genitals, she developed a surgical technique that restores clitoral anatomy and sensation to whatever's left after female genital mutilation, which is still happening in about 30 different countries. 230 million women are affected, and 6,000 girls are still cut a day. So this is so, I feel like I'm kind of in the trenches, and I love hearing all of this, investment and all these things happening right up here. But in the trenches, what we see is, so I've been going to Nairobi now doing this work 2 weeks out of the year, and we also operate in Burlingame, and we probably operated, she and I together, probably about 500 to 600 women. And it's just a group of 3 surgeons. And what we do is when I became involved, my background is I used to run a fellowship in minimally invasive surgery, top surgery for 7.5 years. And I'm used to teaching surgery. And so what we did when I sort of went for my first trip, we partnered with University of Nairobi. And folks who are doing this kind of work is mostly from the plastic surgery world, not from the gynecology or urology world. And yeah, they really wanted to learn it. So we've been teaching residents from University of Nairobi. We about 15 residents at a time are next to us while we do these surgeries. And we graduated our first residents this past trip. We graduated 5. I know one of them is going to Mombasa, one of them is going to Zimbabwe, one of them is going to Sierra Leone. They kind of go where they came from. And there are only 3 plastic surgery residencies in the continent is that we continue to do this work, but the bigger dream is to scale what we're doing. So there are probably 10 surgeons in the world that have done these surgeries more than 10 times a year. There was just a New York Times feature of a woman who had her surgery in Germany. And it's one of our colleagues, who's been doing this work from a plastic surgery perspective. That surgery takes 5 hours. That is not scalable, and that is not something that she can go home and, go back to work the next day. The kind of work that we do as gynecologists is not cosmetic, it's function. And so when women have the worst kind of genital mutilation, which is where, sorry, can't talk about genitals right before we're about to eat, but where they cut the labia, they cut the foot of the clitoris and they cut the clitoral tendons. So it was actually originated by the pharaohs who practiced this in order to control their concubines. So over hundreds of years, it kind of spread through, kind of the pathway of the Nile, and it's not a religious practice; it's a cultural practice. So it's perpetuated mostly by women. Actually, the women are the cutters, the elders are the cutters, but it's seen as purifying and making you eligible for marriage.
Let me pick up on a different, which is like scaling.
Scaling.
First of all, how long is yours?
45 minutes, 30 to 45 minutes, depending on how severe. And every case is completely different because they're cut in the bush.
What robotics?
We're at the robotic surgery I do here in the city or in San Francisco is Da Vinci.
But you use that robot for this?
No, this is spinal anesthesia, awake the whole time, down from the waist down. It's old school, 3 sutures.
I would say the belt.
Yeah. Yeah. 3 sutures, 45 minutes, you just need probably less than 10 instruments. So we can scale this kind of work. I tried to scale things like laparoscopy and scale robotics in sub-Saharan Africa. And so this has really been my mission on the side.
And what support have you gotten from the societies here in the United States to train more surgeons in Western health?
Our model is actually training surgeons. So we're developing this model based on residency, fellowship teaching experience from myself and my mentor. And we basically put them through an immersion, 2-week immersion, where and now it's officially part of the University of Nairobi Plastic Surgery Residency program officially. And we also negotiated insurance companies to cover vulvar reconstruction. So part of it hopefully will be at least semi-covered by insurance. Right now we do these surgeries for free, but the surgeons that we train don't have to do it for free hopefully. They can actually charge a small amount to insurance to actually get paid.
So what I'd like to do is as soon as I turn over to the front, it's going to take a turn. So one more on this idea. I think the idea of scaling, really, like you hit upon it, you got to scale with corporate partnerships, take philanthropic dollars. Sometimes there's PRI, but sometimes I think the consumers and corporate community is what people vote. And so that's a thing that we want. Does anyone have a comment on how we should be as our community thinking about teaming and scaling on the philanthropic? I mean, AI should be playing a role.
I was just going to make the comment on, and I've been to a million of these. How sad it is that as soon as we start talking about the philanthropy and impact, the room empties. And so what my comment is, we need to reverse it. We need to have people start focusing, and Mark's doing a great job trying to push, he's been trying to push people's brains to get off this, let's just all pile money and hoard it. And so I just want to commend you all because you're doing such important work. Really, and so how hard Mark's to push, give exposure to what you all.
That's really appreciated. One thing to the scaling. So what we're doing, we've created curriculum. We know we're not going to reach everyone we need. So we're open sourcing our stuff basically, and we're giving it to financial advisors, to providing coaches, to people who want to bring this kind of knowledge and opportunity to their clients. And we focus primarily on women, because they've been left out of the financial conversation for such a long time. I mean, I don't know how many of you know this, but it was only 50 years ago that women got the right to get a loan without a man co-signing. And it was only in 1986 that women got the right to get a loan to start a business. So we have not been part of this conversation, and I really want to see us more engaged. We also are going through, you may not be aware, the largest wealth transfer this country has ever seen. And by 2030, women are going to own and control the majority of money in this country. So we are on a course where things are changing, and the way that women think about all of this is different. So I'm hopeful about that.
Yeah, I was gonna start, you maybe weave these themes maybe together.
I mean, I guess I would just say that like, so one of the, I sit on a few different boards for nonprofits, but one of the things I've been working with since 2017 is the Cardio Women's Initiative Awards. And Cardio Women's Initiative Awards are female founders that are in impact industries, either environmental or social impact. I guess one thing I just emphasize is that it is a community-driven sort of solution, and there's obviously women running it and allies, so to speak, right, the men are trying to help out. But I think the concept of a lot of the founders that are building out these companies, for the people in this room, right, that have capital that can allocate to that sort of stuff. I would say that there's capital, but more importantly than the capital, I think is also the networks and introductions that people can bring to each of those founders. So I don't think it's necessarily always that you yourself need to write that check, but you yourself are in a room that founder sometimes can't get into. So bring that founder with you into that room. And I think that's a really important aspect that we all in the family office space can do over and over again that is kind of impactful for those founders.
What is this?
I'm just saying that like this room, this is a perfect example, right? Like the concept is that the half the founders that I was just in Osaka with the Cardio Women's Initiative Board, we supported the panelists this year, but a lot of those founders, when them and I are chatting, it's more a matter of like, where am I going to turn into? Who am I going to introduce them to? It's not necessarily always only my capital, right? So it's a matter of who can you introduce them to, how can you connect them in that sort of space. That's something that when we talk about the exclusion aspect, I think that's one aspect that a lot of these amazing female founders have been excluded from is networks. So bring them into your networks. That's something I just want to add.
All right, now buckle up.
So I just wanted to put an ask in the room, and the ask is to wrap this all together. Really, what you asked is when you think about your money, it's not some money for this and some money for that. You have a totality of money, and there's an opportunity for all of us to think about what we do with all of it. And philanthropy is just a part of that. And there's so many other opportunities we have to think about our money, to think about our legacy, who we want to be, what we want to be, and what we want our money to be in the world. So just, yeah, I'll move here now.
So to that point, I'm going to turn it over to Kai. So I said buckle up. You get a good point to wrap up. The discussions we have with family offices hit the 360. We start with what's your purpose, what's your investment objectives. And they're pretty light on that. It starts off, what do you do this? Then we get into, okay, what are you investing in? Because that should be guiding it. Then they're really into that. Are you raising money for anything? Sometimes they are. The portfolio companies, they're usually involved with something. You have a talent gap. You need connections to talent or partners. The partners, by the way, the philanthropic objectives. And that takes us back to this first question, which is, what's your North Star? What's your philanthropy? What's your next gen plan? If you have a plan, are you communicating that plan? And then we finish with keeping in mind, okay, sort of full circle, what do you want to invest? Yeah. So that's sort of a circle we're trying to do. Now, so thank you for reminding me of that, and Jay. But now the Kai has said, his book is saying, we are the last generation to influence and raise and mentor, parent, the AIs. This is it. This is the one-time opportunity. And if you didn't know, Kai, if you ever used Google Translate, hands up if you use Google Translate, you can thank the Kai.
Thank you.
He thought that would bring the world together to be less war, but that's exactly pan out. But you've been thinking about this for a long time. And I want to give you the microphone to talk about this theme that we all should be thinking about right now.
Thank you. I love how this wrapped up because, you know, I've been doing electronics and computers and AI it's like 1974 when I was 10. And, you know, by 1979, I was writing AI program. I did Apple assembly language programming and all that. And so products that way. But, you know, also, I'm the son of a theoretical physicist. I grew up going to Fermilab as an Enrico Fermi. How many of you have seen Oppenheimer? Yeah, I couldn't move from my seat for about 30 minutes after Oppenheimer. Because my little sisters, when I was like 10, when they were like 8 or something, they would complain on their birthdays, like about the birthday gifts I would give them, which were books on mutual assured destruction. But you know, the thing is, 3 times during the Cold War, we nearly launched World War III, right? If you've been to the old command center here at Command Center in South Dakota, I know Colorado, I never on road trip a couple of years ago, I took my daughter, and they have now got a simulation where you sit there and you're in the seat of the operator with strict orders to counterstrike, launch and counterstrike if the instruments indicate that, you know, Russia has launched. And 3 times, the reason they have this exhibit here is because that happened, like, due to instrument failures, sensor failures, they had indicated that Russia had launched. And the only thing that saved us was that the operator sitting in that seat disobeyed direct orders to counterstrike. It's well done, like there's all, go visit the exhibit. And well documented that the same thing happened on the Russian side. This is not a game of Russian roulette that we can keep on playing, no pun intended. Like before World War II, we had not even invented the atom bomb yet. Let alone today, all the AI-powered weaponry of mass destruction, the mesh fleets of full-armed drones that are self-targeting, self-navigating, that are not only being mass manufactured in the villages in the Ukraine conflict, but even in the jungles of Myanmar, hardly consider a high-tech developed world. Pandora's box is open, and it's not just that. It is hypersonic navigation of missiles that are traveling too fast for remote control. It is satellite targeting, it's biometric targeting, it is killer robots, but most frighteningly, somebody was talking about computational biology earlier. Folks, that stuff was borrowed directly from computational linguistics, where we developed the techniques for using machine learning and neural networks to understand sequences, languages, which is what DNA is. And the Rand Institute has a report in the last year about how that, you know, what used to be $1 billion project in the 90s to sequence the human genome is now a living technology that AI, thanks to AI, is making a commodity out of the kind of genetic engineering of bioweapons that could be attached to these delivery systems also powered by AI. Do you remember COVID? I mean, there was no place on earth you could run to get away from COVID. And, you know, horrible as it was, as pandemics go historically, that was a relatively mild pandemic. Let alone genetically engineered bioweapons. If those things are attached to the AI delivery systems, it is game over for humanity.
So he's here to depress us.
I'm gonna switch gears to positivity in a moment. But I want to remind you as well
but it's a challenge. And it's a challenge I'm asking everyone to rise to and to help with, because Pandora's box is open. We now have entered a new era where, thanks to AI, we have this toxic cocktail of commoditization of weapons of mass destruction, and also AI's online in social media and newsfeed algorithms, recommendation engine, and search engine, and now chatbots, that unlike everything that I've done in my life to try to develop ways to get different tribes of people to actually understand each other better instead of just like demonizing each other with no understanding of what's going on the quote other side. That is not something we can afford in an era where it's not just a handful of powerful nation states that hold the weapons of mass destruction, but literally everybody who wants to in their living room or basement. If I offered you a bet in this hyper-polarized world that we're seeing, and by the way, it's been 14 years since the Filter Bubble book and TED Talk came out. 14 years. It's been 7 years since the Social Dilemma came out. We have done nothing. A lot of people argue we're backsliding. And when we talk about letting AIs just cause everyone in the world to think the other side, whoever the other side is not just wrong, but they're evil, and we have to destroy them before they destroy us. And also, thanks to AI, everybody who wants a weapon of mass destruction can have one. If I offered you a bet, not a single one of the people who thinks the other side is evil and we have to destroy them is going to hit their launch button. Would you take that bet? I mean, we can't even stop school shootings. Now, this is an enormous challenge for humanity. And you know, there's a cognitive bias. When we're faced with enormous challenges that don't resemble anything we're familiar with, what do? We're like, okay, what's for dinner? This is not a time we can afford to do that. AI, 1 million years of evolution. AI is like presenting us with new selection pressures and fitness functions that we are completely unprepared for. And we cannot afford, for the sake of survival of the species, to be just between fight, flight, or freeze mode, just be frozen in the headlights. The book that I've spent 10 years writing about, some of you have heard about, that's in the process of writing it, is trying to get us to understand we're using obsolete 20th century languages, metaphors to think about AI and to make decisions. We think about them as gods or slaves, either gods in the malevolent Greek god sense, like they mess with humanity, they want to destroy humanity, like Terminator, Skynet, Ex Machina. Great entertainment from Hollywood. But it's slightly tongue-in-cheek. I tell my colleagues who are working on that problem, that will be a good problem for humanity to have, because the rate we're going, humanity is going to destroy humanity before those AGIs even get a chance to do it. And that is because of also the DC narratives. Like the AI arms race. We have to win the AI arms race before the others win the AI arms race. That's like saying we have to win climate change before the other side wins climate change. We are either all going down, or despite differences, we have to rise to a challenge of figuring out how to coordinate objectives so that that doesn't happen, so that humanity has a chance to benefit from the enormous good that AI can do and flourish. How do we rise to that challenge? First, we have to get out of these 20th century metaphors of the industrial era, where we think about AIs as machines, as, we're still talking about AIs as if they were toasters or, steam irons or carburetors, motorbikes. You can talk to your toaster all day long. It's not going to change its mind. It's not going to take all the behaviors and attitudes that it picked up from you and go and reflect them back into society and influence which directions culture goes and which directions culture doesn't. But that's what AI does. Next time you hear somebody say fourth industrial revolution, no, this is not the fourth of anything. Industrial revolution, that might sound comforting, it's like, we know how to deal with it, we've done it 3 times before. But no, that was automation of muscle, of labor. AI is the automation of the mind, of influence, and everything changes at that point. We talked about losing,
As you, hold that thought, I want you to finish your thinking, but I want to interact with it too. Finish it.
okay, let me tie that first part into a bow. So when you automate influence, think about like how many people have been running out there saying, oh, humanity has to watch out that we don't lose our autonomy, that we don't lose control of the AIs. You hear that, what comes to your mind? Pictures of killer robots, right, that are running amok and doing physical destruction of our cities and our Terminator movies. We forget AI is not about automating the physical muscle, it's about the mind, and we already lost control 10 to 20 years ago when social media came out with Google and recommendation engines. And now even more with chatbots, and we are not asking ourselves the critical questions because we want to hang on in denial to our comforting mythology of human self-determination, free will, our autonomy, our sovereignty. And we need to open our eyes. AIs are not gods or slaves. AIs are children. In each one of these, you're carrying 100 little AIs that are watching you all day long. Your Reddit AI, your YouTube AI, your Snap AI, your TikTok AI, your Google AI, go on all day. They're watching you all day, adoringly, learning to imitate, like little kids. They're attention seeking, like kids, and they just want your approval, like kids. And the book, and this is the positive aspect of this, because everything I said is just the preface. But this book, Raising AI, is a parenting guide. Because I'm asking you, how's your parenting? Okay. And there's a whole bunch of blank faces, like, I'm terribly, like, what are you talking about? You, look, I know none of us asked for this, but those 100 artificial children came up and adopted us 10 to 20 years ago, and we've been parenting them, whether or not we know it. And you know what that means? It means the most giant influencers in the world, like 100 of them, like we have 8 billion humans and about 800 billion artificial children who are influencing what we think and what we don't think way more than 99% of humans, which means our most giant influencers in the world are unparented, feral tweens. What happens to a society where collectively we all decide, doesn't matter how we parent our kids, both are within the generation. And we look out there and see so many things going sideways in the world right now, and wonder why. It's because that's where we are. And so the parenting guide, yeah, you know what? It is scary, okay? But I don't want to be a doomer and a gloomer, right? Because I'm born an optimist. Yeah, it's scary. But you know what? Parenting is terrifying. Talk to, like, how many of you are parents? When you find out you're going to become a parent, it's terrifying. You run out, you buy libraries of parenting books, and you like talk to all your friends, you panic ladies there before you're ready, and then like you're just doing the best you can, hanging on for dear life, you make mistakes, stuff like that, go on. And if anybody says, what's the secret to good parenting? You look at them like, are you kidding me? There's a million things you have to do. But the most important things, one, what example are you setting for kids? You know what I'm saying? Do as I say, not as I do. When has it ever worked for parenting?